During my time playing Path of Exile 2 in LA, I was able to capture some of the passive tree, including many notables and keystones. In the run-up to the launch on December 6th, I'm going to be covering some of the craziest nodes on the tree and taking a look at how you can utilise them in your builds. Now, one of my biggest concerns about PoE2 before I played it was that the passive tree may have a bunch of very generic and bland stats due to the fact that it's bigger than the PoE1 tree, and they had to fill out all of the space left from the removal of life nodes. But I can confirm that this is not the case. The design they've gone with has the more generic and bland stats at the beginning of the tree near the starting locations, but as you branch out towards the outer edge of the tree, you begin to find some very interesting specialised nodes. Some of which are more akin to keystones than a normal notable in PoE1, and others just have some insane stats on them. In this first video, we'll be looking at some nodes in the strength area of the tree, where the warrior stars. Beginning with this one, Unbending, which is located pretty much in the middle of the strength aligned section of the tree. So, there is actually some increased maximum life on the tree, but it's a very, very rare stat. I think I counted a total of perhaps 3 or 4 notables on the entire tree with increased maximum life on them, and this is one of them. So 3% increased maximum life. Seems weak at first glance, but that's not really the case. You see, in PoE1 for the average build, life is made up primarily of flat life from levels, flat life from gear, and a small amount of flat life from strength, combined with a large amount of increased maximum life, mostly from the passive skill tree. An average build may have somewhere between 75 and 150% increased maximum life from the tree, and this stat makes up a huge portion of total life. But in PoE2, a character's total life will have a very different makeup, instead coming primarily from flat life. There's significantly more flat life coming from strength, 4 times as much in fact, so characters with a decent amount of strength will be gaining a chunk of flat life from just this stat. There's also still the flat life coming from levels and from gear, which could scale higher to offset the loss of the majority of increased maximum life on the tree. This means that any increased maximum life modifiers you obtain will have far more value, as they'll be multiplying against a higher base flat life total. I expect we'll see some increased maximum life on unique items too, but overall this stat will be much scarcer and more sought after, and I expect to see most warrior builds taking this node. Any life stacking builds, such as the Witch's Blood Mage Ascendancy, will also place high value on this node, but may end up anointing it or instilling it instead. Next up, check out this one, Made to Last. 0.5% of physical damage prevented from hits in the past 10 seconds regenerated as life per second. Seems familiar? Yep, that's a weaker version of the Juggernaut's Untiring Ascendancy node from PoE1. I was surprised to see this one as a notable on the tree in PoE2, but it's a fun one to have. One thing that really stood out to me during my playthrough, and the sentiment that I've heard from others, is that PoE2, at least in the early game, is a war of attrition. Recovery of resources feels incredibly valuable, especially in those boss fights where flask charges can run out quickly. Anytime you're able to save a flask use because of another form of recovery that you have, it feels really good. And recovery generally pairs nicely with the dodge roll, being able to avoid hits while recovering over time from any chip damage you take. It will be interesting to see how much armor a character on this side of the passive tree will be able to reasonably achieve, and whether modifiers that provide additional physical damage reduction will still be available, to see just how effective this node can be. Skullcrusher is located on the outer edge of the tree, and I wanted to highlight this one because of the Titan Ascendancy reveal, which has the same modifier on the Ascendancy at a higher value of 40% more damage on the surprising Strength notable. These modifiers will multiply together to provide an effective 68% more damage against heavy stunned enemies as long as you're using a mace. Overall, the Titan may be a fairly generic and bland Ascendancy, especially compared to some of the others, but I think it will feel really nice to play. Being able to stun enemies more often and deal a bunch of damage against those heavy stunned bosses, that's going to be extremely satisfying. Next up, Spike Pit, which is located nearby. This one makes jagged ground you create apply 10% increased damage taken to enemies that are standing on it. Now, I discussed the potential of jagged ground in a previous video, and I think having a bunch of ways to generate and explode jagged ground will be really powerful, and this node only acts as another multiplier to damage, and pairs quite nicely with the aforementioned Titan Heavy Stun combo. Alright, let's discuss Leech for a moment with these two notables. Savoured Blood, which is located towards the outer edge of the tree, and Voracious, which is located close to the start locations of both the warrior and the mercenary, right between them. Savoured Blood just seems extremely strong. In PoE2, Leech will not have a cap, and is instead limited by your damage and the monster's Leech resistance. We currently don't know how long a Leech instance will last, but we believe that it may be 1 second, due to Harishi's comments during the Zizaran interview. A 50% multiplier on Leech recovery is incredible. Meanwhile, the slower expiry of Leech would make a 1 second Leech last 1.25 seconds, ending with a 20% net recovery increase to the amount of life leeched per second. But with Leech lasting longer, you'll also gain that recovery for longer in situations where you need it, so I feel that in some situations the downside of this notable is actually an upside. However, the power of this node is truly revealed when combined with instant Leech, such as the Voracious notable, which makes 20% of Leech instant. This portion of instant Leech fully benefits from the 50% increased amount of life leeched modifier, and is unaffected by the expiry modifier. I think this will feel really nice, having a decent amount of instant Leech and slower recovery Leech on top. Okay, I've left these two nodes till last because they're really interesting. Heatproofing is located towards the outer edge and makes 25% of armor also apply to fire damage taken from hits. This is extremely strong on its own. Anyone who's been playing PoE1 for a while will recognise this from a similar stat that used to be on the Juggernaut, which made 8% of armor apply to elemental damage from hits. Armor applied to elemental or chaos damage is calculated post-resistance mitigation, and since armor is more effective against smaller hits, is extremely powerful when mitigating damage that has already been filtered down by resistance. This node is only for fire damage, but it's still very strong regardless. It will be interesting to see if we end up having mechanics such as Tempered by War in PoE2 to make this type of notable far stronger. Now, speaking of fire damage, Unnatural Resilience is located nearby on the outer edge of the tree. This one grants 2% to maximum fire resistance per 40% uncapped fire resistance. Uncapped resistance is any resistance you have above 0%. So, by just having 80% fire resistance, you can take this node to increase your maximum fire resistance from its 75% default maximum up to 79%, which, just like the previous node, is incredibly good value to improve your defense against fire damage. But this one gets significantly stronger when used with Cloak of Flame, a unique body armor that we know exists in PoE2. 40% of physical damage is taken as fire damage, so you're able to mitigate that damage with your fire resistance, including damage over time such as bleeding. Meanwhile, the Cloak of Flame also provides a large amount of fire resistance, helping to further boost the effectiveness of this combo by scaling even more maximum fire resistance from Unnatural Resilience. Like the life node from earlier, I expect a lot of warrior builds to be picking up both of these fire defense notables because of just how effective they are with minimal investment. And that's it. A handful of interesting passive tree notables from the strength aligned portion of the passive tree in PoE2. If you've enjoyed this video and want to see some more notables and keystones from other parts of the tree, make sure to subscribe, as I'll be making more videos in the time between now and launch on December 6th. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.